Give me a minute, and we'll talk about Putin's opening comments at the G20, which I just suffered through so that you don't have to. It was a litany of such unmitigated bullshit, lies, and outright lies and hypocrisy that no person with a working prefrontal cortex that has paid attention to any of the events of the last 30 years could possibly believe. I literally threw up in my mouth a little bit at one point listening to this bullshit. So he starts out, we must think about how to stop this tragedy. Really, must we? I have an idea. Take your troops and go the fuck home. How about that? Let's start with that, Vlad. We have never refused peace talks. Really? You've never refused peace talks. Why? Because you won't give up an inch of the land you have stolen. And until the Ukrainians are ready to capitulate and give up the idea of Ukraine as a sovereign nation, there's nothing to talk about for you. That's why. This is my favorite. He said the words, I understand this is a war. Do you? Then how come at home, if anybody calls it a war, they go to jail for 20 years, Vlad? Huh? Outrageous. Then, this is brilliant too, I'll tell you. I mean, you want to talk about trying to rewrite history. We just had the 10-year anniversary of the Maidan, the beginning of the Maidan here in Kyiv, right? That was an essentially bloodless revolution against a corrupt dictator. And he calls it a bloody coup of 2014 followed by Kyiv's war against the Donbass. Not a separatist movement artificially created by him and his buddy Igor Girkin, just like they did in Ossetia, in Georgia, just like they did in Chechnya, just like they did in Transnistria. Outrageous. Outrageous. Now, he was mostly coherent if the words coming out of his mouth were totally obscene, except for this next bit where there was this rambling series of atrocities taking place in Gaza that didn't go anywhere. It was a kind of pointless whataboutism that just kind of petered out, and then he went back to his script. It was a very curious divergence that seemed almost incoherent and pointless. Now listen to this. He actually said the words, the collective consensus is required. The opinion of the overwhelming majority of the international community cannot be ignored. What? Are you kidding me? You stand alone in your war of aggression against Ukraine, except for a couple of pariah nations that are shunned by the rest of the world. And yet you think that the overwhelming consensus of the majority of the international community is important? You know, I often hear these Vatniks say, oh, what about Iraq? What about Afghanistan? You got to be kidding me. Going into Iraq, the United States had 47 coalition partners and a UN Security Council resolution. Going into Afghanistan, even more, 90 international partners in the coalition and a UN resolution. It was not a unilateral invasion for the purposes of empire and self-aggrandizement like this bastard. Unreal. He then goes on to blame the West for the turbulence in the markets increasing, chronic problems in the international financial sector, food insecurity, and energy. As if all of that isn't down to him. They're one of the world's largest oil producers, and now they don't even export gasoline anymore because things are so bad Without the international expertise, 22 of the 44 mega refineries are shut down inside of Russia. They can't keep the production up because they don't have us, because it's a country run by a bunch of gangsters who are interested only in filleting the population and taking everything for themselves. He did go on to assure Africa that the first Russian food deliveries are on the way, ignoring the reality that he had blown up and burned 500,000 tons of food in the port of Odessa and Mykolaiv and the Danube. 500,000 tons of food. You may not notice the 39 cents a loaf that your bread has gone up, but I assure you, 39 cents a loaf in Kinshasa is the difference between life and starving to death. And it's down to this guy right here. Russia stands for the restoration of international economic cooperation based on the norms of the UN Charter. I mean, it would be funny if it weren't so fucking tragic. And then finally, in a final irony, Russia is working for more women's participation in the economy, while at the same time, the Ministry of Education is looking at reducing women's access to higher education so that they can stay home and have more babies. It's unreal. It's unreal. The world has to wake up to the fact that everything that comes out of this guy's mouth is a load of shit. He can't be trusted. He is not a partner. He cannot be negotiated with. His entire life is based on these lies. His entire campaign here in Ukraine is based on these lies. And for us to have to even listen to it, it makes me nauseous. Please, if you haven't gotten in touch with us yet, me or Vanetta, to get the letter to President Biden asking him to exercise his presidential drawdown authority and arm Ukraine for what they need to get through the winter, please reach out to one of us and do that if you're an American. Thank you. And for all the Americans out there, happy Thanksgiving. Take this guy, this speech, this pack of lies, and be grateful for the fact that we live in a country where the institutions of democracy have so far proven to be effective in combating the lying liars and the lies they tell. And when Donald Trump dies in jail, we'll have all the evidence that we need of the superiority of our system over this.